Okay, good morning.
All right, Shin Ayin Vav. Bor uve'er shebein shtei chatzeros. So here we have, again, two adjacent courtyards. Each has their own group of houses, and there's a wall in between them. There's no doorway, and there's no window. There's no passageway whatsoever. But, again, this is not so common nowadays, but what do they have right in between them, underneath the wall? They've got a bore or a be'er, basically a pit, and that's how they get water for their houses, right? They didn't have plumbing in those days. So, they each want to bring it into their homes. What happens? So, Aleph. Bor shebein shtei chatzeros v'in b'neim petach al chalon shichu la'arev. There's a solid wall in between them. And so therefore there's no way for them to make an eruv because there's no doorway, there's no window, and they did not set up this ladder on both sides. Or there happened to have been a window or a doorway, but they're not friendly enough, or they forgot. They didn't make an eruv. They are not allowed just to simply pull out water from the be'er, from their well. They can bring it into their chatzer, right? Because it's basically a rishus yachid to a rishus yachid, of a chatzer to a chatzer, but they cannot bring it into their houses because they did not make an eruv. So what can they do? Unless there is a proper mechitza of 10 tefachim high, proper wall between them, right? That was the case, so we have to continue. And it must be that it's part of this mechitza, the entire mechitza from the beginning to end, from the top to bottom, has to be at least 10 high. But at least one tefach has to be entering inside the water. Okay?
This picture is clearly not correct. This top picture with the square over the before, because it's out of context.
So it's just a snapshot, but we can discuss the picture afterwards. But you can imagine how you like this. A couple different pictures I sent out. V'tzarik sheyeh tefach min ha'mechitza yira b'toch hamayim. V'im hayta mechitza kula b'toch hamayim. If the entire mechitza is inside, it's also not okay. Tzarik sheyeh tefach yotzei menu l'mala min hamayim kedei shetiyeh nikeret reshut zeh mireshut zeh. There has to at least be a tefach sticking out of the water. So you need, at the end of the day, a wall of 10 tefachim going over, right, somewhere towards, somewhere down the middle, lav dafka exactly in the middle, but somewhere over the be'er. So each side can take from his side. But you also have to have a tefach in the water and a tefach outside the water. So it looks like it's going all the way down to the bottom of the pit, and it looks like it sticks out, so you can see it, so it looks like it extends above as well. Another way is, let's say you don't have a wall, you just take a plank, a board of wood, you lay it over the be'er, and as long as this plank of wood is 4 tefachim wide, that's good enough. Each one can take from his side of that plank. Because we assume a person's not going to extend his arms or the kli beyond 4 tefachim. And so, again, this is not mathematically, physics 100%, but it's the concept, and we're dealing with a din derabanan. So therefore, it doesn't have to be exactly perfect mathematically. Obviously, we know the water mixes around, and the walls, extends, don't extend. Okay. But the idea is, as long as it looks like this, it passes the din derabanan. Haga. V'davka imba l'malot b'kelim shel bayit, alo b'kelim shel chatzer, alo b'inan shum tikun. As I said in the opening, obviously we're talking about a case when you want to bring it into your house. So then that's when it becomes an issue. If you're just going to drink it in your chatzer, it's not a problem. The hachatzeros rishus achas hein, as we already learned, all the chatzeros together are still considered one rishus yachid. And you don't need Eruvin from one chatzer to another. It's because you only need Eruvin, Erev Chatzeros, because of the batim.
Your intention, what you're going to do is, that the kli has to be a kli chatzer, not a kli body.
I think it means depending where you want to bring the water. Or you take a kli from the house and you want to dip it into the be'er, so that's also a problem. Because you can't take it out of the house to put it outside. So either way. Okay, the same principle as before. Okay. Beis. Be'er shebe'emtza hashvil. Now, let's say each person has his own chatzer. Outside the chatzer, you have this reshus. Again, we're talking about reshus yachid, of course. There's 4 walls. There's a mavli. There's something in between the 2 chatzeros. But there's no, there's a wall in between. So each chatzer has its wall. And over the wall, I think we're going to have a case here with a window. But basically, you want to draw from the well. Each chatzer wants to draw from the well that's outside their chatzer, and the well's in, or this pit of water is in the path in between them. So, right, this is, again, there was no running water in those days. So, beis. Be'er shebe'emtza shvil ben shnei kotlei chatzeros. Af al pi shehi muflaget mikotel ze 4 tfachim mikotel ze 4 tfachim. So according to the first opinion that's brought over here. Okay. According to the first opinion over here, we're going to see a second opinion in the Ramah later on. So it doesn't matter if it's within 4 tfachim or farther apart from 4 tfachim. Either way, shneim emalim mimenu. Both chatzeros are allowed to draw water from this be'er. Ve'enam tzrichim zizin al gaban, and you don't need to have even a little protrusion stick out that reaches, it could be very thin, but that even reaches the be'er. The opinion of the Gemara that you need that, Shulchan Aruch says we don't hold to that. So you don't need anything to do anything special. She'ein adam oser al chaveiro derech avir. So this is a principle. When it comes to eruvei chatzeros, if the only way you're getting access is through the air, or through a window, not a doorway, then your friend is not going to be oser the area to you. So since you're in a chatzer, which is a reshus yachid, the other place is a reshus yachid, so there, right, this be'er. So midaraisa, there's no problem, midarabanan, there's no problem of dalad reshios. And you need to have an eruv chatzeros, so you don't if there's no proper access. It's derech avir through a chalon, or over the wall, however you're doing it. So therefore, it's not a problem. Haga. V'davka k'she'ena chatzeros petuchos l'shvil rak b'chalonos. But obviously you can't have a doorway. If you have a doorway, then basically, if each chatzer is having a doorway into this mavoy, into where the be'er is, then since they have easy access, and both chatzeros are sharing the mavoy, they're sharing the be'er, the well, so therefore they're oser one to another, and nobody can use this common chatzer or mavoy in the middle, or the well in the middle, unless they make an eruv, because again, it's a common place that they're both using, and they have normal access to through a walkway, a doorway. So, okay, so that's when they have to make an eruv, right? Basic laws of eruvei chatzeros, right? If they're sharing one chatzer equally, and they have normal access to. Okay.
He says if a chalon is okay.
If it's a chalon, it's okay, because you can't walk through a chalon. You carry things, you can throw things, you can draw things with a string, but you can't walk right through. So therefore, the land does not oser from one to another. There's no din derabanan of needing an eruvei chatzeros.
You said before, she'en adam oser al chaveiro derech avir.
Yeah.
It means avir or chalon.
Yeah, same thing. Well, chalon is avir. Yeah. Okay, you can't walk there. You can reach through the air. V'yesh omrim d'im einam meflagim arba'a osrim afil b'kai gavna. And there is an opinion. The Ramah says, if it's within 4 tfachim, it's also asr, because even though it's derech avir, it's so close and so easy to reach, it's as if it has the same din as a petach. We don't say derech avir if it's so close. Okay. Gimel. Shtei chatzerot uvneim shlosha choravot. So now you have two chatzeros, and you've got three charavot. Kol echad mutar. Okay, basically, did I bring the picture for this one? Or did I forget? It's not here. We sent out a picture. Okay, so fine. Let's say there's 5 houses in a row, or each chatzer at each end has their own chatzer, and yeah. Yeah, so each end you have a chatzer with its own group of houses. Okay, basically 2 chatzeros on opposite ends, 1 on each end. In the middle, you have 3 ruins, 3 houses that people don't live in there anymore. That's basically what it means. And you're going to see there's even a kula here. Because even if they're open one to another, they're not oser, even though there's an opening of eser amos, like you have the whole wall of the house broken open, has to be obviously a long wall. And even, kol shekain, even if it's open, we allow you'll see. We're more makel, even though it's, you can have a pirza of more than 10. Let's read it, we'll see. Shtei chatzeros v'neim shlosha choravot. So you have 5 things in a line. Chatzer, 3 choravos, and a chatzer. Kol echad mutar be'ota she'etzel ishtamish b'derech chalonos aydei zrika. So each house at the end, or each chatzer at the end, they can access the choravot through a window, and each one gets his own. V'hamtzait muteret lishneim. So here, the middle chorva, or the middle bayit that no one lives anymore, they can both use. If the access would be through doors, so then since they equally can use the middle one, it would be aser. Because they share it equally and they have easy access, so therefore it's like a chatzer in the middle, and they both share it, and therefore they're oser one to another. But since we're talking about they don't have a doorway into there, they only have a window, so therefore the middle one is not easy access, and therefore, even though they're both sharing the middle one, again, derech avir, through a chalon, it's the middle one that's not easy access doesn't oser the other one. So each one can use the chorva that's next to them, but not the one that's far away next to the other person. So in this scenario, each one can use 2, but they can't use all 3.
How did he get to the middle one? If he only gets from his house to the one next to him.
So you get there by throwing, or maybe you can walk around. Basically to pass objects is through zrika. How you get in there, you can crawl, you can come through the other way, but if there's a doorway from another access, whatever, you can come to your friend's house. But as far as passing objects, it's through zrika. And that's why the middle one is, even though they're both sharing the middle one, we're not aser all of them. Now, what happens if the choravot are set up in a way? Again, there's a couple different scenarios of pictures. There's a couple ones that are printed in the Mishnah Berurah. There's pictures in the back, Ozahadar and whatever. But anyways, the scenario is each one has one chorva next to it, and the third one, it's not in between where no one has easy access. This case is each one is connected, or within 4 tzvachim, the Mishnah Berurah points out, each one is basically connected to the third one. So, the first case that we just read is the middle one is not connected at all to each side chatzer. It's blocked off by another churva. Now, the next case that we're reading is the middle one. It's in this configuration where it's actually touching both chatzeros. Okay? Shahaita hansai keneged ashtayim kishlosha rashe kankan. So there where it's all connected. Kol echad mutar bechurba shel etzlo. So each chatzer has one churva that's only next to it. So that one, of course, they can use. V'hashlishit akrova l'shtei chatzeros, but the third one, which is connected to both of them, at the end, asura l'shteim. It's asur to both of them. Because it's right next door, it's considered like easy access, it's right next door, and therefore, it's asur. Okay, so now you have 2 neighbors. Let's say their bathroom is upstairs on their outdoor marpeset, and each beta kisei belongs to each individual person. In other words, you have basically 2 bathrooms. There's a wall between both bathrooms. But when they do what they do, and it drops down below, it ends up in one common place. So you're going from upstairs, it's two individual people, and they didn't make an eruv. Lo eruvu yachad. They didn't join the Beit HaKisei above together. So now when it drops down below, reshut shenim shaletet bo ve'asurim. So therefore, when it drops below, they're dropping it on purpose to a chatzar below. If it's going straight down without falling on something, and then kocho into a chatzar is okay, even if there's no eruv down below. But to drop it straight without having it land on a slanted platform to fall off, so then you're dropping it into a common place because they're both using the chatzar down below together, and that would be aser. However, as we learned before, we should set it up so that it's mutter lechatchila. But if Shabbos started and you have no other bathroom, it's mutter b'diavad or b'shatat chak to gadol kavod habrios. Okay. Shin ayin zayin. Din shtei aliyos zo keneged ptuchas lechatzer. Okay. So now you have upstairs, you have a marpeset for each one. Yeah, here. Each upstairs aliyah has its own marpeset, and it leads. Okay. And there's a chatzar down below that they share. Shtei aliyos haptuchos lechatzer zo keneged zo. Ve'achad asta guma bechatzer kedei lishpoch bechatzer she'ein ba 400 memea. So what's the case? In those days, they didn't have drainage, so they needed to get the water out of their house. So they would go to the marpeset. That's up, right. The upstairs people would share the outdoor marpeset, the outdoor staircase, the outdoor. Like a balcony upstairs that they would share before they walk into each other's homes, and they would all make their own eruv together. Let's say. So the case is, and you want to pour your water from your house and get it onto the chatzar down below. So, just to recap real quickly from Shin Nun Zayin, we had a discussion. The case over here is when you have this chatzar that's less, we're starting out with the case of a chatzar that's less than 4 by 4 amos, and it's next to a rishus harabim. So you can't just simply pour right onto a chatzar and have it drain right into a rishus harabim. If it'd be more than, it depends on the season. Okay, we're not going to get back into all the details, but that's the case is, in a case where you're not allowed to pour it into a very small chatzar. Unless you made a guma, you made a pit, or an uka, whatever you want to call it, for the water to go inside. So again, one of you made an eruv, and one of you didn't. So, im eruvu yachad shtei mutar lishpoch memeim. So if both of you, both of the two different buildings, right? They have two different merpeses, two different buildings, and then they have their outdoor stairwell with their outdoor courtyard that leads to this chatzar. So if each building made an giant eruv and they connected all of them together, that they can all pour into this guma. The reason why they have to pour into the guma is because it's next, this small chatzar, less than dollar by dollar, is next to a rishus harabim. So again, that's from the previous halacha. But now, we're going back there again to discuss the halachas of eruvei chatzeros. So the best would have been if both buildings made a eruv together. But the case was, that we're discussing over here, v'im lo eruv yachad, but they didn't. So then, v'ha'achas erva la'atzma, v'shniya lo erva klal. So one made an eruv for the upstairs merpeset, and the other building, every man for himself, they did not make an eruv to carry on into their marpeset. V'shniya lo erva klal. Zo shelo erva asura, v'zeh she'erva muteret. So the one that made an eruv is allowed to pour into the guma, and the one that did not make an eruv is not allowed to pour into the guma. Ubilvad shelo tishpach lehedya baguma ela tishpach ba'aliyah vehem yordim leguma. But since they didn't make an eruv, so the one, let's go over it real quick. So the one that made an eruv and the marpeset up above, so they're allowed to carry from their house into their marpeset, no problem. But they can't pour straight into the guma or straight into the chatzar because the chatzar down below is shared from both buildings. So the Chatzar, they're not allowed to bring into, because they didn't make an Eruv. So, what do? They are allowed to take the water from their house, pour onto their balcony on the floor, and let that run into the Guma. And then, there's no problem. Let me just keep reading. Hagad, the Kocho Bechatzer She'eno Meravet Shari. Because just like we learned before, a similar concept, Kocho, you pour into the floor and it lands into a carmelite, that's allowed. Here we're saying you throw onto the floor and the koach, you know it's going to continue to flow with gravity onto a Chatzar that she'enu meravet. So you can't put things into that Chatzar, but there's no eruv. It's because you're sharing that with two people, but Kocho is mutter. And also, just if the Chatzar would have been much bigger than Dalet Amos, which is usually the case, then everybody can pour through this Kocho business, and no one even needs a Guma whatsoever. Now, the reason why the one who doesn't make an Eruv is not allowed to is basically because they didn't make an Eruv upstairs, so they can't take water from their house and bring it onto their marpeset to throw on their marpeset, because their marpeset doesn't have an Eruv, and they didn't make an Eruv for their building. And to pour water in their house, onto the floor of their house, to run out, and again, this is dirty water, right? This is their sewage, to pour it onto the inside their house, to run outside, to fall into the Chatzar, so that would be okay, technically, but there's a din d'Rabbanan, because once we allow them to pour on the floor in their house, they're going to be like, what's going on over here? We're making our house disgusting. They're going to end up taking the water and pouring it straight outside. So therefore, basically, if they made an Eruv, they can pour through this Kocho into the Guma, or if it's big enough, they can just pour onto their marpeset, no problem, and let it run off. And if they didn't make it, if the apartment did not make an Eruv upstairs, then they can't do it at all. Okay, Shin Ayin Chet. Din Chatzeros HaPetucho Zo Lezo. Okay, this is basically one long seif. We'll see if we'll do it all or half, but it's basically one long seif. This siman. It's all one concept. Aleph. Shalosh Chatzeros Petucho Zo Lezo Petuchos Reshus Harabim. So the first case is you have 3 Chatzeros. Each one has their houses. Each one let's assume they all made their Eruv for right now. So you have 3 Chatzeros, and they're all adjoining each other, and they're also all open to the Reshus Harabim. So each one has its own access to get out into the Reshus Harabim. They don't have to walk through each other's courtyard in order to get out. Okay? So, the 2 outer ones, you have 3 in a row. The 2 outer ones made a Eruv with the middle Chatzar. V'achitzona lo ervu yachad. But the 2 outer ones didn't make it with each other. So if you have A, B, C, A made an Eruv with B, and B made an Eruv with C. But A and C did not make an Eruv. So can they all 3 of them carry, or not? So normally, achitzona asuras zoim zo ve'amtzai is muteret min kol echad mehen ve'hen mutaras ima. So normally, B can carry, and B and A can transfer food together. C and B can transfer food together. Just make sure you don't get it mixed up, because food from A can't get to C and C can't get to A. However, that's if that's if they put each Eruv in the outer places. But if they both of them put their bread in Mr. B, in the Chatzar of B, the middle one, in one house, really it's supposed to be in one kli, but okay. Then all 3 of them are together. Because since the Eruv is sitting in the middle home, that connects all 3. Base. Now, so now you have one Chatzar behind another Chatzar. And the only way the inside Chatzar can get out, let's say A and B. A is connected to the street, to the Reshus Harabim, and B is the inner one, and that can't get outside to the Reshus Harabim unless it walks through the outer Chatzar or A. So, okay. Upnimit petucha lachitzona v'chitzona lamavoi. Right? The inner one is connected to the outer one, and the outer one is connected to the mavoi or Reshus Harabim. V'yesh lapnimis risas haregel lachitzona. And the inside one is allowed or has to walk through the chitzona. So the din's like this. Im erva pnimis la'atzma v'lo chitzona. If the inside made an eruv for itself, Right? That Chatzer made an Eruv for those Batim. V'lo achitzona, and the outer one never made an Eruv. Or she'erva kolachas la'atzma v'shachach echad me'achitzona v'lo Eruv. Or they both made an Eruv, but one of the guys forgot to get included in the outer one, so it's puzzle. So Penimit muteret v'achitzona asura. So the inner one is good, because outer people don't have to walk to the inner people. So the inner one is good, they have a proper Eruv. But the outer one can't. Because either they don't have an Eruv, depending on the case, or even if they made an Eruv, the case is because he never made an Eruv, or it's a Pasal Eruv. But Erev achitzona v'lo penimis, if the outer one made a proper Eruv, right, they should be able to carry. V'lo hapnimit, but the inner one, B, the one on the inside, didn't make an Eruv. Or she'erev kol echad la'atzma v'shachach echad me'apnimit v'lo Eruv, or they both made an Eruv, but one of the guys in the in the inner chatzer forgot and was left out. Shtein asurot. They're both aser. Why? Why? So we're going to see the klal at the end. So, since they're both, the outer one made a proper Eruv for their Chatzar, but the inner one didn't. And the inner one has no Eruv, and the inner one has to walk through the outside. So since the inner one doesn't have a kosher Eruv, and they have to walk through the outside, they ruin it for the outside, and now neither one of them can carry. Eruv kolachas la'atzma, but if each one made an own kosher Eruv, kolachas muteras b'chatzera. Each one can carry in its own chatzer. Each group of houses can carry on its own group of houses in its own chatzer, because they each have a kosher one, and that works. Because there's a principle we're going to say at the end, any time the inner one has a kosher Eruv, then even though they have to walk through the outside, they don't create problems. But whenever the inside one doesn't have an Eruv, and people can't carry from one to another, and since they have to walk through the outside one, the principle is they oser it for the outside people. Okay, we'll stop.